What's up, Giants fans? Welcome back to Giants Latest. Today we're going to get into some roster moves because there's been more of them. I want to talk about the offensive line after this trade was made, and then we're going to talk briefly about the Giants versus Dolphins coming up this weekend. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're a Giants fan, this is where you will get all of your Giants news and information. Trying to get to 7,000 subscribers. We're at a little over 6,200, so trying to get to there before the preseason is over, so lock in so you get everything you need to know. Shout out to Kalshi, who's a sponsor of this show. All right, Daniel Villele is gone, which I have to tell you, I think I talked about this yesterday. My TikTok feed has just been a blast with, other fan bases and content creators and people being like, I can't believe that Daniel Villele and Evan Neal are on the same team. Not anymore. Not anymore. Which I think it makes a lot of sense now why we've seen more of Daniel Villele during camp in with the twos. He's gotten a lot of time there. I believe he even got some reps with the ones. And then, of course, during the preseason game, this was a showing. So he ends up getting traded from the Giants to the Jaguars. I am a tough guy when it comes to criticizing Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen, buddy, hell of a job. The Giants in return got a sixth round pick. A sixth round pick. I gotta tell you, I'm very impressed with that. For someone who was barely gonna make the roster, if he was lucky, or probably end up being a practice squad guy, hell yeah, Joe Schoen. I will give you flowers when I think you deserve it, and you deserve it. Bravo, excellent work. Hell of a trade deal. And, when I was kind of going through the pros and cons as to whether or not I thought Joe Schoen deserved an extension or deserved to even stay on after Brian Daboll got fired, one of my biggest pros for keeping him is that he's been great with trades. And alas, he proves to us again that that is what he's good at. Not so great at roster building, great at getting value in the trade. So it's not conditional. It's a sixth round pick, and hell of a deal. I mean, I'll take it, man. I'll take it. Evan Neal, you're next, Broseph. Sayonara. No, I don't know what they're going to do about Evan Neal. We're going to get into the offensive line depth in a couple minutes here, but I wanted to talk about this trade and give Joe Schoen credit because I think he did a hell of a job with this. What I would love to know is how involved someone like Donna Ponte was, if she's involved in this at all. Like I said, Joe Schoen has proven that trades are one of his strengths, so he deserves the credit here. But I'm just curious if this is where Donna Ponte stepped in or anything like that. Would be very interesting. But it's obviously clear that there are people in the NFL who think highly of Daniel Villele, who think that he is capable of something at the NFL level. And, whether or not he's going to be a starter in Jacksonville is TBD. They lost one of their players to a severe injury throughout this season, or for this upcoming season, one of their offensive linemen. So, they're getting Daniel Villele in return. And I think it will be fascinating to see what ends up happening with him there. And, if he ends up being a starter. But all I have to say, if you're a Giants fan, I think you could take a deep breath in, a sigh of relief that, if, God forbid, John Runyon or CC goes down, you are most certainly not going to see Daniel Villele out there. Now, like I said, Evan Neal's still on the team, so we might be holding our breath if he goes out there. But for now, it will, it'll be Joshua Ezeudu most likely, or Aaron Stinney. Also keep in mind, Lucas Patrick can play the guard position as well. So he's technically the backup center behind JMS, but if needed, he could play guard. So we'll see what ends up happening. Let's knock on wood and hope that that doesn't happen, especially to the starting offensive lineman. Moving along to Juju. One of my predictions that I made when they signed Juju was that he's not going to make the roster. And like I have said on here, it's not often that I'm right, but sometimes I get it right, and I was not surprised that they waived Juju. I mean, he showed a little bit in camp, but ultimately he was dealing with these knee injuries and just couldn't keep up with some of the other players. And when you look at the competition between him and Berrios, to me, it's just not even close. Berrios is out there getting reps with the ones. And unfortunately for Juju, the injuries are what most likely set him back and slowed him down, and that sucks. It's something that's out of his control, but luckily for him, this is the NFL. There are injuries day in and day out, and I swear every day I'm getting some Adam Schefter breaking news alert about a poor team who lost a player to an injury. It's Alvin Kamara. It's, the Jaguars guard. It's it's the Texans wide receiver. I mean, these poor guys, I really feel for them that they are losing players left and right, and I feel for the players. But I do think that someone like Juju will have the opportunity to make another team and get to show off his skills and capability elsewhere. It just will not be for the New York Giants. So, speaking of the New York Giants, as we all know, they are taking on the Dolphins this weekend. I've heard a lot of things about Malik Willis. I've seen some very interesting takes about him. TBD on whether or not we will see him on Saturday. I do think we're going to see Giant starters. I think it's going to be a good matchup. If you are ride or dying with the Giants and you think that they're going to bounce back after their Vikings lost, you are predicting that the Giants are going to go ahead and they are going to beat the Miami Dolphins. Well, you're in luck. Because on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. So if you think the Giants are going to go out there and they're going to beat the Miami Dolphins, well, guess what? 59% of people on Kalshi agree with you, because the Giants right now are trading at a 59% probability to beat the Dolphins. There is over $19,000 specifically on that game. So now that means at the 59% that if you trade $100, the payout will be $164.76, which is a decent payout. If you're riding with the Giants, it's a good deal. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position, trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app and use code FANARCHFOOTBALL to get $10 when you trade $10. Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything. Now, let's move along to the Giants offensive line. And we can talk wide receiver depth too while we're at it, knowing that these two players are gone. I want to start with the offensive line because I know that's one of everyone's always biggest concerns, which is valid. So let's get into the centers. As we know, we have Brian Hudson and we have JMS, who are the technical centers only on this New York Giants roster. Now, when we get down to the guards, we have Jake Kuba. I'll put numbers up for you guys. So our two centers, then we have Jake Kubas, John Runyon listed here as our guards. Then offensive linemen, we have JC Davis, Jermaine Illuminor, Joshua Izudu, Jared Gray, Brendan James, CeCe Maui Noah. We're up to 10, okay? Then we still have Marcus Bowe, Evan Neal, Lucas Patrick, Ryan Schernicke, Aaron Stinney, and, of course, our most beloved offensive lineman of all time, Andrew Thomas. So that puts the Giants at 16 offensive linemen. I'm curious to see what they do when it comes to the roster. I think they will likely keep 9, which I think is probably the best way to go about things, especially knowing that they do have some offensive linemen who are flexible. They can play center, guard, tackle, etc. I've also seen, while we're on the subject of this, some inklings coming out that people seem to think that Marcus Bowe might be getting some reps at center. And when Bowe was drafted, he had said that he wants to learn every position on the offensive line because he wants to know what his teammates should be doing and where they should be and what it's like to be in that position. So I think there's a possibility that we might see that from him. Not during the regular season, but maybe during some practices, they'll slide him in as center. I also think at this point, you're probably only doing that if like all hell has broken loose and JMS gets injured and, the guards get injured and you need Lucas Patrick at guard and Brian Hudson sucks. Like there has to be some sort of catastrophe, I think, for that to happen. Could be something they work on with him next offseason, depending on how JMS's season goes. This is the last year of JMS's contract, so it's going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening there. But 16 offensive linemen is, I think, some pretty good competition. With that being said, let's go through the wide receivers because that also has been interesting from a competition standpoint. We have Calvin Austin, OBJ, Braxton Berrios, Dalen Cambry, Malachi Fields, Xavier Gibson, Isaiah Hodgins, Jalen Hyatt, Ryan Miller, Darnell Mooney, Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton. So that puts us at 12 wide receivers. And I think there's been decent competition there. I would say for someone like Jalen Hyatt, who's dealing with an injury. And again, the injuries are what they are. Like we've talked about this with Evan Neal. And at some point I do feel a little bad because the injuries are out of their control, and I feel like it's something that has kind of slowed down Evan Neal's career a little bit. But Jalen Hyatt, like, there's a lot of competition for wide receiver. There's 11 other guys, maybe really 10, that he's actually competing with because no one's competing with Malik Neighbors. So, you know, he's got 10 other guys he's competing against. He's dealing with some injuries. He's dealing with a not great history since he's been drafted on this football team. So, you know, I think it's probably disappointing for him that he's not where he's at. So he's going to be someone that I'm very curious to see what happens on Saturday. So the Giants and the Dolphins have a joint practice later today, which we are going to discuss tomorrow. We're going to talk about any highlights, anything that looked good and bad, if there are any fights, anything newsworthy coming out of practice. I don't know if you guys have seen the 6 fights that happened at the joint practice between the Cowboys and the Saints. I mean, I was laughing to myself because I'm watching clip after clip after clip, and they're going after each other's helmets. I'm like, you guys play football. Tackle someone. What are you doing? This is like they're like grabbing at the bars on the front of the helmet. I forget what they're called right now. But, you know, I'm laughing like, what are we doing here? But also don't be punching players' helmets. Like, you don't need a broken hand from a stupid fight in a joint practice, you dummies. But anyway, nonetheless, it's been entertaining. Giants and Dolphins, please don't do it. Please don't. Just spare everyone, okay? We are 2 teams in the NFL. There's a few others, but we are 2 of the top teams in the NFL that do not need anyone getting injured because they got in a fight at a joint practice. So begging you, please keep it together, you know, rein it in for the joint practice. And then we will preview the game on Saturday, which is where I'll get into more players to watch. But I do think if Jalen Hyatt is healthy, it's going to be very interesting to see who he gets reps with and how often he gets them, and if they put him back on special teams. If you were here last summer, I caught Jalen Hyatt out doing punt and kickoff returns. And I knew the special teams coach at the time, and I said something to him after practice, and I was like, oh, I spotted Jalen Hyatt out there. And he was like, you did? It's like, oh, yeah. When I'm at camp, I'm locked in, baby. I'm full on attention. I might have to wear contacts, but I can see what's going on. And he was like, oh, yeah. Like, couldn't believe that I caught on to that. And then we never really saw Jalen Hyatt do that again. New special teams coach. Will it be something that they work on with him? Probably not, because I don't really think it's something that he's good at. But will be interesting to see what happens from the returner perspective too. But wide receiver, spoiler alert, is definitely going to be one of those positions to watch again on Saturday. So we will get into that tomorrow. So stay tuned for more.